It started with what would Laura Roslin do, and now we're asking what would Sharon Raydor do? Welcome to episode 6 of the What Would Sharon Raydor Do podcast, where we talk with the woman that knows her best, Mary McDonnell, and dive into her backstory, reactions, and interactions with the team. I'm Kathe Mazur. I'm one of the team. I am Andrea Hobbs, DDA Andrea Hobbs, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here with Mary, who I just love working with. So this is a big, big thrill to be here and just to talk. If I wasn't talking about it with her here, I would be talking about it with her in her trailer because she's so great to hang around with. This week's episode will touch on the Major Crimes episode 8 of season 5, Off the Wagon. So be warned, there may be some spoilers ahead. If you haven't watched it, go watch it and then turn this back on.
And can I just say, everybody, how lucky we are, because not only do we have DDA Hobbs with us, but we have one of the greatest audiobook people in America, if not the world, sitting here introing this podcast. It is so amazing, Kathe, to have you here. We're really happy. They've been waiting, by the way. When we couldn't do it the other week, there was such a hullabaloo, and I felt terrible, as did Chelsea. We were like, we're going to disappoint them because they love you dearly, and so they're thrilled.
If it's disappointed, the opposite would be appointed. So I hope you all are very appointed now that we're here.
I think they're probably wildly appointed.
Wildly appointed. So I'm going to jump in. This episode 8, seemed especially hard for Andy when dealing with his relationship with addiction. But what about for Sharon? Seeing the reactions of both the victim's wife and mother, how was Sharon feeling when all of this was going on?
Well, I just think addiction's tough for her because she handled Jack for so long, and she both participated in enabling him and then had to grow out of enabling to stabilization and then finally divorcing Jack. So she's been through several stages. I'm sure that Sharon Raydor has probably attended an Al-Anon meeting or two. I think there's very complicated feelings about it all, and I think the whole thing with Andy is part of the risk of all of this for her very protected heart. So I think it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I honestly feel like she doesn't really, she both understands addiction, but she doesn't tolerate enabling very well. That's, for now. What do you think?
Well, what I think is interesting in listening to you is I think that that the more interesting choices that you tend to make as an actress, not the more interesting choices that you tend to make, but that you make interesting choices, that there's that feeling of, this maternal, angelic, all-tolerant ideal. And what I love is that that's not the kind of choices you make. That it's not you. Sometimes I think it's easy for women to want to be that and to want to be seen as that and be able to kind of radiate this warmth and the ability to take care of everyone. And what I love about your character is that's not your character. Is that you actually are very warm and maternal. But I think when it comes to this area of Jack and the men in your life, that isn't an area that's been a walk in the park. You don't marry somebody like Jack if you have a natural ease at picking the right man. So I think that that's interesting in terms of what you just said about the fear of the relationship with Andy.
Yeah, it could go badly.
What do you think made, if I may, what do you think made you be willing to take that extra walk with Andy? What was it?
I don't think that she has ever consciously said, I'm going to go the extra mile with Andy. I think that Andy's presence in her life woke up her ability to love and trust. And they are such opposite people. See, the thing about her and Jack was that there was a very similar sparring. Their minds had a lot of spar to it. So when they were younger, that was very exciting to spar with your loved one. And that's not the case at all with Andy. He comes from a completely different point of view. I mean, where Sharon gets all complicated ethically about like just this question, how does Sharon feel about the addict or the criminal or whatever, because she feels many different things. Andy's like, he's a dirtbag, he's an addict, he's in this, he's that. He's got things, he's a very complex man, but he has found a way of sorting through the debris that makes it simpler and grounding for her. So he's the opposite of Jack, personality-wise, and I think that's part of why she finds him so compelling and endearing and trustworthy, frankly.
And it's interesting, too, that Jack was a lawyer. You haven't been in a relationship with somebody who was sort of on the same side of the desk as you.
That's right. Fighting in the same team.
Yeah, fighting on the same team.
Yeah.
And there must be, I would imagine that there's a lot of comfort in that.
Well, what about Andrea? What's going on with her?
Andrea.
And men
Andrea,
or women
Andrea,
or what's the scoop?
Andrea.
Do you think?
I think that Andrea is, for me, that she eats her work. That her work is just, my feeling about Andrea is that she, when she was 7 years old, she was like playing with cutout dolls who were lawyers, and and taking like her brother's Ken doll and making it a criminal. I think that this is her first language. I think the law is her first language.
Absolutely.
And that the language of intimacy, or that those languages are much more tiring for her, and that she gets energy from work, and she gets excitement from work. And I think that that people
aren't that interesting.
They're complex. It's not as easy a problem to look at. And I think, those kids who, and this wasn't at all me, who can look at a math problem and something about the elegance of the way it works is really exciting. Like doing a math problem when you get it. I think that that's how Andrea feels about the law. It's complicated, and she's got to crack it.
Right.
But when she cracks it, it's exciting. And I don't think people are like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you ever crack a person where you do, and then the next day you go, I just got it. I just figured out how to deal with this person, and the next day you can't do the thing you thought you would do the day before, and you're like, I failed again, but I cracked it. How come I messed up? So I think that Andrea is ripped apart by people, by the complexity of people, and that she can't be in charge. And I don't think she likes to not be in charge.
In intimacy.
In intimacy, she can't be in charge. And I think that being on top of something is her happy place.
Right.
And I think, James Duff has said that Andrea doesn't like children. So I take that as also, if somebody doesn't like children, it changes the reasons to be in a relationship or the need for it or not. And I think that I loved him saying that, because it's an interesting place to come from, instead of this sort of stereotypical sad older woman who's not married. I think that if you don't want to have,
not that.
No, and I don't think she doesn't have sex.
No, I don't either. I don't think she doesn't have sex either. And the same way I've been saying all along, I am absolutely sure that Sharon had sex between Jack and Andy. Somewhere along. I mean, we have to tell, what do these women do? Are you kidding me? It's just not in the writing, for God's sake. But God knows what. And I also
think, and I think that, and I think you have to be careful when you're a woman in a position of authority. You have to be very careful who you sleep with.
Or not.
Or not. It makes me think of Queen Elizabeth I. And, she couldn't she had to be so careful about who she married, because whoever
Right.
she married, that was going to dictate
Right.
the way her country went.
Right.
So I think she ended up making the choice that she would be alone because she couldn't protect the country.
Right.
I think there's a bit of that when
Yeah.
you're a woman in authority, where
it is,
you
definitely.
are going to be judged by the man you choose.
Right.
And you're going to have to make different choices.
Either that, or you're going to have to behave very gallantly through the fire.
That's
For
right.
example, our current gal who's running for the highest office in the land,
That's right.
had to really walk through the fire, and still is walking through the ashes of her marriage.
And this is
she's
what's
still with
so
it.
smart about what you just said, is that you lose your respectability and you lose people's credibility in you because of actions that your husband takes, in a way that I don't think works the other way.
No, it doesn't at all.
So if Andrea were to be with somebody,
Right.
and they behaved unethically, or they behaved, in a certain manner, she cannot afford having her credibility is so intensely important to her.
Yeah.
That the idea that somebody might see her husband with another woman in a bar, and that she would become a laughingstock, that people would no longer respect her because they'd have to say, well, she doesn't have very good judgment. Where's her judgment? How come she didn't know her husband was cheating on her?
Right.
These are, I think, are real issues when your job.
Well, Sharon, absolutely. And Sharon has been through that with Jack, given that they were both very well known to the law, the community of justice. No, what am I trying to say here? Well, the law enforcement community, but then there's and the court system.
And the justice.
And the justice system, they are both pretty well known within those circles. So I really, really relate a little bit to the dilemma of getting through the public disapproval of a marriage that stepped outside of people's comfort zones. And when you choose to stay with the person, it's almost rougher for you than if you, and it's nobody's damn business. That's the other thing about it that's so interesting. And so what you're talking about, the double standard of women, that on the one hand, they have to be more careful about their choices so they don't risk there. On the other hand, if something does, if there is a public transgression, the woman's going to get it, even if she's not the culprit, in a different way than the man would. So it gets so complicated when the bottom line is, it's nobody's business.
No, it's not.
And it's just so tricky.
But we live in a world where it fascinates people.
Right.
So that kind of brings us back around to, who are you going to sleep with?
Right.
I mean, we know who you're sleeping with now, and not we know who
apparently
Sharon is sleeping with now. But in terms of who Andrea is sleeping with, she would have to be careful. You can't sleep with a criminal. She meets a lot of those. You can't sleep with one of those.
Can't sleep with the judges.
Can't sleep with
They're
a lawyer.
Too old. No.
Yeah, can't sleep with the judges. Can't sleep with gotta be careful sleeping with a lawyer, because you might end up across the table. Can't sleep with someone who she's the boss of. Can't sleep with someone who she's the underling of. So, probably not sleeping with the DA.
Well, yeah, but you never know.
But you never know.
You never know. Let's jump ahead to the question about our friendship.
Okay, the question is, so we've talked, and we see a lot about Sharon and Andrea's friendship. And the question was that Sharon and Andrea seem like they're friends. How do they separate their personal and professional relationships? So one of the things that pops up immediately in my mind about that is that the question really is interesting: are they friends, and what does friendship mean in terms of their situation? People always want us to be out at a bar having a drink, usually with Dr. Morales as well. And so the question is, do we have a friendship that's outside of our professional lives?
Well, I think it's fascinating to me that I think speaks to another question, is that both you and I, Kathe, leaned into a respect for each other as opposed to a conflict, which is out of the realm of what Hollywood usually likes to set up. And although I don't think James either wanted to intentionally set that up, there was room for things to be interpreted that way if we wanted to, but we didn't. We kept leaning into the idea that these women work closely together and have a deep respect for the other person's process and rely on each other to fill in the blanks.
And I think that was organic in the writing. And I think you're right. I think that if you and I had wanted to twist it the other way, we could have. But I also do feel that organic in the writing, and in some ways, in my mind, a reaction to Andrea's relationship with Brenda, which was very adversarial. Although I really came to respect her, we were completely different life forms.
Yeah.
And so I think when you come into the picture,
Yeah.
you are not a completely different life form.
No.
And I understand you in a very profound way. And so I think that even though we have had conflict, and I think I have read you the riot act in times and been very, angry or, harsh. I think that, as you said, I think it was organic that that I knew what you were made of, and that I saw what you were up against coming in to this group and this police station. I saw what you were up against. I saw who they were and what you had to do to win them over. And that I think that really informed Andrea, the grit that you were. And if I ask myself, who were you to me before you took this job?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure I knew you.
Right.
But I don't think that we were in each other's orbit.
No, I don't either.
Really, very much at all.
Yeah.
And so I think it was going to be, well, who's this woman going to be? And then when I saw who you were and your respect for what I do, and when I say I mean Andrea, because I don't have a better way to do that, I think that really informed it. But I really do think it grew.
Yeah.
And I think that, can I dovetail?
Yeah.
There's a question about what's our favorite thing about working together.
Right.
So I would like to take that
Yeah.
and dovetail, because I remember from the very beginning, whenever I got to do a scene in your office, how much I loved those scenes in your office. And I remember from the very beginning, when there's a lot of time spent where the crew is getting ready. There's a lot of time spent with lighting and with setting things up, and there's a lot that goes on in a set. And when you and I just got to have to sit in place across from each other with a lot of extra time, and the conversations that we always have, and that are about our families and about our lives and about the world and about politics and about whatever, how much I always loved them and how intimate they seemed.
Right.
And I am sure that those also informed how our friendship started to come across, because I think we ended up having a very fast friendship.
Right. I agree with you. We got there pretty quickly. And I think part of that is a combination of what we need out of women in our lives, so you can identify it when you see it, and the fact that we are both playing very smart women. So it accents it. Sort of like if I'd been playing, whatever, and you were playing whomever, we might have gotten a little bit longer to know each other. It might have taken a little bit longer because we're both the kind of actors who take on the qualities of our characters. We don't play at them, we play in them. That's right. Both of us.
That's right.
And so you and I, our friendship, Kathe, I think has been supported by who we're playing, so we got there faster.
I think that's a great point. And I think that the writers have written to the top of a person's intelligence, which is my great, great gratitude.
Yeah, me too.
And that it is a huge relief, and not nearly as common as one would want it to get to play a character where you can be as smart as you are.
Right. That's right.
And so I think that what happens when you get to be as smart as you are,
Yeah.
or smarter,
Or smarter,
you know,
yeah.
when you get to be that, then all the other parts of your personality get to relax and fall into place and
Yes,
flow.
so true.
And, you know, because you can't know less than you know.
Yep.
And when you're playing someone who knows less than you know, it's a...
Which is a big problem in Hollywood, although I have to say I do see it changing because of series television. Women are being dumbed down less. But for a very long time in Hollywood, I would notice that you'd be with women who would be quietly admitting to each other what they knew because the people they were playing didn't know that much. And the people who knew a lot on the set were always the boys. There was the men. And so there was like secret pockets of smart women in Hollywood in their trailers with the door shut. In their trailers with the door shut.
Yeah, closeted smartness.
Yeah, but
And there
it's coming. We're much more free. Thank God thank God for all of us, men and women, that there's a more balanced point of view in Hollywood that has emerged through, I think, the freedom of television. Honestly,
I do think it's
television is changing our lives as women. I really do, and I love it.
And I think it's fantastic. And I also think, and so that I can give you a compliment that's just a true feeling that I have about you, which is that that was what was extraordinary when you burst into the scene in Dances with Wolves. That character did not have to be as intelligent and deep as you made her. It wasn't necessary in the writing that she be that way. And I think the thing that took all of us aback, you know, as young actresses watching this young actress that we didn't know, like I didn't know you, who you were. And I won't forget that moment in the movie theater where I went, who the F is this? Because I hadn't seen that happening. What you did, I hadn't seen happening. And so I think that was a really profound moment. And you continued it. You continued it in your film work. You continued it on Battlestar. You continued to be that working to the height of your intelligence. And you can't take that away from the stream of where we've come.
You know what? I take that as a compliment, and I really appreciate it deeply, and I would say the same to you, by the way. But I will say, I'll add to that the only thing that you said that is a little bit, that I'd like to correct just a little bit, is that I wasn't young. According to Hollywood standards, I was 37. And I was 2 years older than Kevin. So kudos to him for casting an older woman opposite him.
Okay, many kudos to him.
I know, but wait. No, so here's what I'm thinking, is that because of what I'd already been through, and I'd already been through a lot of rejection trying to squeeze myself into parts that were less than the way I think or am. I'm not like saying I feel like the common gal. Do you know what I mean? So I'd already been through I'd had such great things in the theater that required my mind at full bore. But my experience in auditioning for film, there wasn't that much television to really attract someone like me. But my experience in auditioning for film was that I was always sort of missing the boat because of that other level that I couldn't not bring, but it wasn't wanted. So when he saw, she's illuminating this for me on the first audition, I remember him talking about it. I knew somehow that this could be different. I could be free. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I don't know how to do the other thing, Kate, and I know you don't too. I don't know how to dumb down. I never did it well. And I know some amazingly smart actresses who did it, who knew how to do it without it, water off a duck's back. And I so admire that quality, but I didn't have it. So it took me until I was 37 to get in there.
And I think, some women feel also, it comes out of who you're connected to, too. So there might be some very, very brilliant women, but the women that they loved in their lives, maybe the women they grew up with or the women they knew, were not the women who led with their brains. And so there's a real
so
love.
They have a different,
for getting in there. And I think, I think for myself, I really had so much love as a young person for the women who were brilliant.
So did I.
And so did you.
For sure. We were both lucky in our upbringings that we were surrounded by really compelling people. Your father, my God, Do you want to talk about him a little? I'm sure they don't know anything about your dad, or they might know a little bit about, but
my
it's
dad
so
was
interesting.
was an artist, and he was just a fantastic human being and a great artist. And he was a political-minded person and a community-minded person, and from a very young age, very interested in civil rights, very interested in, very upset about what was happening in this country with black people and the way they were getting treated when he was, 18 and had come from privilege. He just was a great human being. And but the thing that really fits into what bringing it up at this moment is that he loved creating, and he made it look like a fun way to live. He had no bitterness. He did not compare himself to other people whose careers were better or worse or anything. He spent not a moment being
That's
a victim.
amazing. What a liberated man.
Yeah, he was really liberated, and he was really quite extraordinary. He loved what he got to do, and he did not spend very much time in comparison. And I think that, and he couldn't believe that I was an actress because he thought that it was a terribly hard way to live. And my mother is a poet, and she's a wonderful poet, and the two of them would get to go into their workspaces and create by themselves, and then they got to decide what they wanted to show the public.
Yeah.
And the thing that they could never wrap their minds around wanting to do was what we do, which is to constantly be in front of people, making yourself vulnerable, and that you don't get a chance to kind of package it all and then sort of put your hands over your eyes while other people have an opinion about it. You have to sort of stand there in the heat while people are. One of my favorite memories is doing some audition for something, and it was very clear at one point that they weren't going to hire me, and this guy who was in the room, the producer, started slurping on a Slurpee.
Oh, yeah, I hear
like in the middle of my audition. So I'm like acting and I hear, and I'm just thinking, well, I guess I didn't get this, but I've still got 2 more pages.
Oh, God.
Like, I gotta keep acting like, Scheherazade or something, while this guy is basically, he is just waiting for this to be over.
Yeah.
And that was something that, so I always knew, I always understood that there was a real difference between creating in this way and creating in a way where you get to choose.
You know what I think is interesting, though? That we're talking about our influences, the way we were set up to be able to be thinking humans. And we both had... We both attribute a lot of that to our fathers. I think what I'm learning so much about the way fathers influence the way their daughters enter the world. Having really amazing, brilliant mothers doesn't hurt. But particularly when we grew up, and particularly when I grew up, because that was even earlier than you grew up, my father was the representative of how to interact with the world, not my mother. And she was a very bright woman. super bright, but she didn't necessarily act out her. She didn't engage all of that intelligence out there. We got it at home for sure, but she didn't engage it out there. But he was the way that we learned, and he was all about girls can do anything they want. And he had us competing right out of the gate and things like that. And I think about that more and more and more. It's like, fathers, pay attention to what you're showing your daughters. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't know. I think I had this therapist once say that, in his opinion, there was two very distinct messages you get. You get a message from the male aspect of your upbringing as to how the world works and how you should feel about it, and the opposite. And so my kids, of course, laugh all the time about the backwards nature of our thing, because I'm quite often was never home, and fortunately my brilliant husband could be in and out, and I was on set somewhere. But when I look back at my upbringing, yeah, it was the way my father interacted with the world that taught me how to, that almost made it impossible for me to be comfortable in the dumbed down roles.
I
I
think that's really great. I think that's really true. And I think in a way it was almost like the opposite, where I think it took me decades to sort of understand the world. Because the world that I had been exposed to growing up was not the world. And I still feel that way. When I watch women be willing to be diminished and give their support to leaders who will diminish them,
right,
for example.
Yeah.
I'm very confused.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like you how can you support someone who's diminishing you? But of course you can support someone who's diminishing you if the message that you got was that it was okay to be diminished.
Yeah.
If the world that you grew up in, and I say this, there's different reasons why people
Absolutely.
get the feeling that they can be diminished, and in some ways, there are people who feel that women's power works very well behind the scenes.
Yep.
And that's where women's power should be, and that it's very powerful to work behind the scenes and to influence things without, with being behind people and pulling all the strings, but being behind people. But I didn't know from that.
No.
I was brought into this world without a feminine wile.
Right.
I have no idea how you kind of like flick your eyelashes and then things sort of fall into place.
Yeah.
I have a much more head-on
well,
relationship.
There's another reason where I think way in which Sharon and Andrea are compatible, whether or not they've ever had a drink, is that James Duff has not given us feminine wiles through which we work. But Brenda had a ton of them.
But Brenda had them.
She was all about it.
She knew what she was doing.
Yeah,
and she had them. And so just to round out that question, do you think we've had a drink?
I do.
I just burped.
That's very funny. We're not drinking now. I just want to make this clear. Although that might be really fun for a podcast, but we can't do it on the lot. Sometime we'll do it at my house and we'll have a few drinks before. But I think we have to do it as a separate podcast.
How about like drunken major crimes?
What would Sharon? No, we can't. That's
How about
it's
just drunken major crimes and we
now,
just get the different cast members to come over?
How about just Mary and Kathe? We could Facebook Live Mary and Kathe chat drunk, as opposed to we can't do that with the show, and we can't use What Would Sharon Raydor Do? It's official.
So, do you think we've had a drink?
I do. I absolutely do think we've had a drink, and I think it happened around the time when we were actually finding ourselves. Oh, ye who Andrea, who does not like children, was so deeply on Rusty's side. And I think somewhere in there, we had dinner or drinks or something and talked about a lot of things, not just him.
I don't think that Andrea would have seen what was great about Rusty without Sharon. I think that Andrea was quite willing to put Rusty in a box.
Yep.
And thought she knew what she was dealing with. So I really think that the evolution of Andrea's relationship with Rusty came completely through her friendship with Sharon.
Right. Well, now listen, everybody. Clearly, Kate and I don't need much prompting. I mean,
So we know we haven't gotten to all your questions.
So we'll have to do it more, and we'd like to do it more. We didn't get to all of your questions, but we also probably went some places where I'm sure we did, where you need to. But I just want to say what a thrill it is for me to have you here, Kate, because I admire everything about you as a woman, as an actress, as a friend. I feel very lucky that you were on this show that I stumbled into, and I mean it. And I am so amazed by your mind and your heart. So I thank you so much for joining us, and we will have you on again for sure because this thing's going to blow up.
Well, thank you, and you know I feel the same, and I feel very, very, very lucky and fortunate to have accidentally gotten to be your friend, which is really a privilege. So thank you so much, and thank you to the fans.
Thank you to the fans.
So this is Kathe Mazur, DDA Andrea Hobbs, thanking you all again for tuning in and for listening, and thanking my incredible host, Mary McDonnell, for any number of things I could thank her for. Don't forget to send in your questions by commenting on Facebook and majorcrimestv.net or tweeting with the hashtag WWSRD. And thank you this week, especially to Sophie, Jess B., Danielle, Sarah, and Christy for your questions, but really thank you to all of you who sent in questions because they all help us to figure out what we're going to talk about. So maybe we didn't answer your specific question, but we saw it and we're thinking about it. So thank you all.
This show has been brought to you in part by MajorCrimesTV.net.